Welcome to the EVready Podcast, featuring industry leaders and their perspectives on electrification, hosted by EVready Energy. Hey everybody, welcome to the EVready Podcast. Thanks for joining today, and I am honored to have on the podcast former ChargePoint CEO and current ChargePoint advisor, Pat Romano. Pat, thanks for joining.
Chris, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining. I think when I was thinking about the type of people that I want to have on the podcast, there's probably like nobody that I've had more good conversations with, where we kind of go back and forth a little bit. And I love your personality and kind of your approach to a lot of these difficult conversations and questions. So thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. I enjoyed all my conversations with you. Still do.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're getting to do this.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure we're going to jump into a few conversations that we've had previously as well. So first question I had for you, you were ChargePoint CEO a few months ago, and everybody's curious what you're doing today. So tell us a little bit about your current situation. How are you spending your time?
Well, like you said in the introduction, ChargePoint. I'm trying to work on things with the team there, and so I have a set of initiatives that the team there has gotten me involved in. So that's a big part of it. And obviously, I was at ChargePoint 13 years. That part almost it was February, first week of February, we went 13th anniversary. So I'm a few weeks shy of 13 years. And so, my affinity for that place will be unwavering forever. And it's not only the place, but the people. So whatever they need me to do, I'm going to do. And whatever they want me to stay out of, I'll stay out of, because I'm not going to wear out the world. Because I respect and love the team there. And so that's one thing. What I'm also trying to do, and you know me quite well, I think your audience knows me probably very well personally at all, but I am a hopeless engineer. I'm just an engineer at everything. I don't know how my family or friends put up with me. I'm glad I have them. And so I am getting very organized about how I think about how I spend my time in the future. And I am coming to the conclusion that, I'm not done with operating roles in companies. So I'm going to pursue that carefully, right? I want to pick well. Much like when I sold my previous company and took the job at ChargePoint, I made a decision then that's even more, I think, important now. I don't want to work in an endeavor that is not impactful beyond the financial return to investors in the company. It's just, life's too short to not have as big an impact as possible. Now, I don't want to sound tone deaf. Not everyone gets that. I have that luxury because I've had a little bit of success, so I've got a little bit of flexibility with respect to how I pick that. I know a lot of people don't get the luxury of being able to just flippantly say, well, I'm going to narrow the subset of companies I can work with that are going to have large impacts, because people have to pay the bills. I know as a majority of my career, my kids were little, I would have to think about all that stuff. So after recognizing that, though, I'm a very fortunate individual and have the luxury to basically qualify an opportunities by that. I'll tell you the genre of things I'm looking at or thinking about looking at. And because I'm a hopeless engineer, I have two buckets. I have the bucket of, this could be my day job. I could make it a day job. And I don't want this to necessarily be my day job, but I want to be involved in it somehow. Advisory, friend of the company, board member, I don't know, whatever. Some kind of role where I got a finger in it somehow. And over here, a list of things that, hey, these things can be my day job. So in no particular order, and I'll probably not get everything that's on the list, but let's probably let's hit the elephant that's in the room. Let's think charging technology companies. Uh,
It's
I
good to hear you didn't trade in your orange bike.
huh?
It's good to hear you didn't trade in your ChargePoint orange bike.
I did no. In fact, as a going away present, the team there is just I really, really, really miss every single one of them. I still see them and talk to them, but I just miss the daily interaction. So here's how nice that team is. Okay, they bought me a custom designed race kit, the outfit that you wear when you're in a triathlon.
Yeah.
That is ChargePoint branded to match the bike that I had painted when I bought it with a ChargePoint paint job. Because they know what I think of the company and the people there, and that just says like a lot about the humans that are at ChargePoint. They're really
I've always
wonderful.
said, like, obviously I was there before, like, the number one thing at ChargePoint, and it is so real, is like the people at ChargePoint. That's the thing that I miss. And I hear other people come and go, but that's the one.
Yeah, so well, I don't know what we did right. I'd love to be able to bottle, but I can't tell you what the formula is. But you know, part luck, part some kind of thing that we did. We have some awesome human beings, like people that if I got into a situation personally where I needed mental support or just a shoulder to lean on or whatever, I know I can count on a lot of people, and they can count on each other equally well. It's just in one direction thing. So charging companies, I don't want to make my day job, and I would never do anything remotely competitive to ChargePoint, only because I got I got I got my baby there, right? And I got more importantly, I got a set of people that I love and respect so much. I'm doing everything I can to make that entity, that wonderful place, as successful as possible. Complementary things to ChargePoint in the charging space, I probably wouldn't do. It's not on my like day job priority list, but because I've been in charging for 13 years, but I stay involved as a advisor board member, whatever, if those opportunities popped up, and I'm evaluating those things. But they have to be complementary to ChargePoint. They can't be competitive. It's going to sound crazy. I'm very interested in nuclear as part of the solution for the energy transition. I think renewables are only going to get us so far. If you do the math on how much storage you would need to make renewables solely the solution for decarbonization of our grid, you're not going to get there fast enough. Um, and if you look at not only fission, which is incredibly advanced now relative to all the things that conjure all the bad things about nuclear, um, it's quite useful. And more importantly, there's a lot of really great advancements in fusion. And I've been talking to some folks in that industry. It's really amazing. And, it's been one of those things where people, I think, have said, it's been 15 years away for the last 50 years. Well, eventually you crack the last problem and it happens, and they're getting closer and closer, especially a lot of the great work that's being done now on containment magnets. Um, and so I'd like to be involved in somehow in that industry, because I think it's huge. And then I've got a soft spot for anything electric with respect to aviation. I'm an advisor to Linse Capital, one of the largest investors. Michael Linse has a fund that's specifically looking at that stuff. And so that could be a day job, is aviation or drones, right? Either one. I have a close friend who's got a drone company. In fact, he and I started Two Wire together, my last company, um, and I'm working with him on his drone company right now, which is fascinating. It's just, and he is the best engineer that I know, and he's a pleasure to work with. So there's stuff there. Um, I think there's going to be a lot in the energy space that's applied. So if you look at some of the problems with that AI is going to generate, your brain consumes This is an aside. Your brain consumes about, I think it's about 20% of your calories. It's in that range. It's a lot. Why is that relevant? Why it's relevant is AI is going to consume a lot of power, because think about what the human version that's trying to emulate is disproportionately consuming in terms of the energy necessary to keep you alive. If we're trying to emulate even a portion of that relative to what we're doing now in computing, it's going to just dwarf it. And the power consumption and just how we rethink how we literally power the data side of this is going to be there's going to be a lot of tech and a lot of business models and a lot of creativity applied to that. So that's interesting to me. And then space and most things, and look, I don't, I'm not sure, trying to go to Mars or anything like that. I mean, I think Elon's got the financial scale and the breadth to be able to take a shot at that, and thank God that someone's kind of maniacally focused on kind of pushing the envelope, because what's happening is all the technology that's kind of needed to put that together is benefiting a lot of other things. But there's a lot of things in communications, in space tech, there's just so much that's going on to support different applications that can be space-based. I think that's interesting. It's unlikely to be a day job for me, but could easily be an advisory job, or it could be a day job. It depends on if they have the skill set overlap for that.
And
I think things
it,
involving healthcare. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
just to stay in the AI piece for a second, um, how is AI going to affect the automotive industry? Because the way I kind of I don't know, I'm not an engineer. I don't understand AI, but I think Tesla's approach, they're a car company right now. Eventually, they're going to be an AI company,
Mhm.
and I'd love to hear how you think that's going to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the biggest impact that AI is it's going to have a lot of impact. But the obvious impact that it's going to have is an autonomous drive, right? And by the way, on the aviation side, there's an autonomous component. It's actually easier because obstacle-wise, when you're in the air, there's just less obstacles, and there's less density of vehicles. So if you think about the autonomous flight problem, aside from policy conservatism associated with anything that's in the air, which should be, I'm not criticizing that, it's a much easier problem. So it's likely to break first in vertical applications like flight, or constrained applications, construction, farming, things like that. You're already seeing the autonomous penetrate pretty heavily in farming. It's been there for a long time, and it'll continue to go. But why? And so I think the breakthrough in some people's thinking associated with autonomous drive is that autonomous drive isn't about teaching an AI how to drive. That's a relatively simple thing. The hard thing about driving is not the driving. The hard thing about driving is the random set of circumstances that can impose itself in front of a vehicle. And the vehicle has to be able to interpret it. I'll give you an example. When you pull up to a crosswalk, you're approaching a crosswalk and you're driving. There's no stop sign with the crosswalks here. Okay, so you're approaching your crosswalk and you see a person that's distracted looking at their phone step off the curb. You have a mental model because of your entire life leading up to the point when you got your driver's license. You have a mental model of a person because you are. And you're like, that person is looking at their phone and is likely distracted. So you have a mental model for the behavioral characteristics of someone who maybe has been drinking too much, maybe is physically impaired, maybe is not paying attention. You have a mental model for all this stuff. You see kids playing soccer in the front yard with no fence in the front yard, and they kick a ball that missed the last kid and it's going to roll in front of your car. You anticipate that because of the knowledge in your brain about life and your circumstances, not about, I know how to make an unprotected left turn safely by reading stop signs and traffic lights, and that ain't the hard part. The hard part is all other stuff, animals, construction, random things going on in proximity of the vehicle that could impede it, that it has to anticipate. That's what drives the AI problem. So I think the shift in why, frankly, Tesla was able to get their humanoid robot up the curve to where it is relatively fast, by the way, is when you say, hey, wait a minute here, instead of creating an AI that knows how to drive, why don't you just create an AI and then teach it how to drive, right? The driving part's not the hard part. It's like, how long does it take a 16-year-old to learn how to pilot a vehicle? Not very long. Why? Because they circumstantially understand everything else around it. So that's, I think, going to be the big change that's going to advance the automotive field is the larger AI ecosystem is going to learn how to get bigger and bigger AIs that understand more and more human context, and then teaching those AIs, extending those AIs to learn how to drive a vehicle. That's a small increment because they already know everything else, and then the AI can basically expand its knowledge incrementally just to understand the piloting dynamics of the vehicle. So I think that's going to be because there's an existence. I love the arguments about, do I need LiDAR? Do I need this? Do I need that? Do I need, here's the existence proof. It's very simple that you only need a single camera to drive a car. Your eyeballs aren't two cameras. Your eyeballs are a binocular camera because you get depth from stereopsis. You get depth perception because you have two eyes that have a slightly off-angle view of the same thing. So you are interpreting. It's not like you're like a lizard where you could flip one eye to the left and one eye to the right. You can't make them two cameras. You can't do that. So you have one camera. Your camera's mounted on a swivel, your neck. You don't have 360-degree ability to rotate your neck. I don't know what your field is, but if it's 180, you got pretty good neck flexibility. So you can see that hemisphere in front of you, right? You're limited by your eye's resolution and your ability to deal with darkness. So you have all those limits, right, that are there, and then you have a limited slew rate or swivel rate on your head. You can only turn from the left to the right so fast because the musculature and the construction of the human body is what it is. And then what you have, so you can see behind you, is you have three mirrors. You have three mirrors, equivalent of having dynamic cameras that are pointed kind of to the side and behind to give you the other hemisphere that your neck can't turn to see that easily unless you literally reposition yourself in your seat. So what it says is one AI, your brain, and one camera on a swivel that has about 180 degrees worth of field of view that can't move instantly from one view to the next, but has a finite rate at which you can scan, and the ability using mirrors to see behind you. So you could argue that maybe you replace the mirrors with some additional cameras, but they're kind of natural replacements for each other. That's all it takes to drive a vehicle about as well as a human. Here's the challenge. Augmenting the camera with a lot of sensors is basically putting a safety net around an AI that isn't wholesome enough to be able to handle the circumstances. That's the only reason we have all these other things. Now, we could use these other things to be better than a human. That would be great. So maybe we do. Maybe we have some radar or some LiDAR, and the reason is, hey, they fall to the ground, can't see out your windshield, would normally pull over and not go anywhere. Well, maybe the car could still drive in those circumstances. Awesome. That's wonderful. Why don't we just get back to how well a human could drive a car? That'd be a great starting point, and then we can go further. So that's primary how it's going to affect the auto industry. Here's the secondary things. I was out with my friend and his drone company yesterday, right? They were working on the prototype, some really breakthrough, cool stuff that he's doing. So we were having a conversation about aerodynamic design. And I said, there's a lot of degrees of freedom. There's a lot of factors when you design a drone or car. Sounds like a machine learning problem. You could just basically say, look, I could do a whole bunch of calculations and experiments that are point experiments based on a theory that I come up with. If I change X, then Y happens. Or I could just let the machine learning algorithm try all this stuff in a simulation environment kind of arbitrarily and see what the hell it comes out with. So now imagine active suspensions, aerodynamic design for the exterior of the car so it still looks nice and doesn't look like a teardrop, right? Because, otherwise it's going to get the wing, and that's not very exciting. Um, Cabin temperature management, positioning of the audio in the car, and improvements in the audio environment and the entertainment aspects to the vehicle, all that sort of stuff. Driving assistance, so you don't have to take your eyes, you don't need, make the text to speech really so bulletproof that it actually works. So you can ask it really open-ended. You can have an open-ended, more open-ended kind of natural conversation, with the AI that's powering the vehicle, and it can decide things. So you can say, "Hey, look, kids are screaming in the back. Can you find, like, what they usually like, for food? What are my options?" Imagine being able to say that instead of having to say, "Okay, let's see. I'm in Florida, so there aren't any In-N-Out burgers in Florida, so I got to look for the." Instead of having to do that, you just basically say, "Oh, the kids are screaming in the back. What would they like? I got to stop to charge my vehicle anyway. What would they like?" And imagine it comes back saying, um, and by the way, the other thing that is a little pet peeve of mine, um, could you please find a place that's in the direction of my destination? My nav system knows where the hell I'm going. Could you stop suggesting restaurants that are 4 miles behind me? Because I don't want to back up. I mean, just the simple things. That's where the auto tech is going to get affected by an AI. And that stuff doesn't require a million regulatory things to happen. So while we may get to the ability to drive autonomously before the powers that be really enable it because they don't trust it yet, we will get to an environment in vehicles where we can have open-ended conversations. And it's going to not just be in the vehicle, it's going to be everywhere. It's
Is
going to radically change how often you actually need a screen. It's going to be really mind-boggling, but you're I think gonna actually have personal assistants that are effective. And by the way, my parents are, they're still awesomely mobile and stuff. They're 80, soon to be 81 and 86. So they didn't grow up with tech. I think the tech community has done such a crappy job making stuff for people that didn't grow up with tech. I mean, come on, they just make it way too hard on folks. I'm an engineer by trade, so I can usually, they can hand me their phone and I can be like, "Oh, you didn't know about the whatever feature that if you go into settings and do this and do it and you turn this on," and they'd be like, "Okay, not for nothing, but we probably could have found that if we invested 4 hours, but we don't want to invest 4 hours in that. We'd rather go see our friends." Well, imagine when AI enables that to not
so
have to.
so the second piece of AI that isn't being focused right now, everybody's focused on the autonomous thing. To your point about regulators, it's going to take longer than the technology. Can probably do a little bit sooner. Who is doing the version of AI that you're speaking about that's more tied to the experience?
It's more tied to the user experience in the vehicle.
Yeah.
I think every car company out there, to some degree, is trying to figure out how they apply AI exactly in that way. Is how do we create a digital assistant extension? And the battle is the same battle that they've been fighting, frankly, for a long time. Car companies will either become a docking station for a phone, or they will become platform that they add value on. It's up to them. Now, I went through exactly the same thing ecosystem wise in my last company. We were in the broadband space. So now imagine your broadband carrier, you know, Comcast, your phone company, whoever's giving you broadband, right? The conversation I would always have with the executives there is, "Oh, you better be swimming upstream on the content side pretty quickly. It's voice, video, and data. You got a leg up on the voice side if you have a wireless carrier, component to your business. people are going to be using cell phones, but man, if all you are is pipe, that's not a good thing. Well, a few cable companies have a little toe in the content war, but not many. And you know the legacy kind of more telephony oriented companies, they really weren't successful in establishing that, so they get commoditized. They get commoditized completely. There's complete interchangeability there. It's only price, and so over time, because reliability and coverage catch up, right? They all catch up, and then you get the buyer, the consumer basically can only differentiate on price. Takes a while.
So
Things
this is
settle.
this would be my question from that then. So I always tell people, like, if you look at Apple, right? Like Apple, if you ask someone in Gen Z right now, what phone are you going to get? They know what phone they're going to get. I think it's 9 out of 10 Gen Z have an iPhone today. It was 87%. I think now it's 90% today.
In the
So it's
United
all
States, that's true.
in the United States. Yeah.
When
So
a
it's all,
phone's $1,200, that's not true for most of the universe. I
yeah.
don't. I mean, look at what I'm carrying, right? I got one of them, right? I love what you know. It can innovate a little faster for me, but I mean, I'd like the next one to do a lot more than this one. I bought this one because it's USB-C and it like enabled me to throw out half my cords. Um, but it's solid platform. I mean, it's reliable. It's got great features. Works with the Apple ecosystem really well. I'm not knocking Apple. I think there's some things you could do, but it's expensive.
You bring up a good point though. People in the U.S. buy or Gen Z buys an iPhone because of iMessage. In Europe, they do WhatsApp. In Asia, I actually don't know the name of it, but I know it's. I think maybe it's Facebook, but it's
WeChat,
another tech.
WeChat in China.
WeChat in China. Yeah, yeah. So I guess my comment to that is like tied to the automotive space. It's always been like, um, what's the make and model? What's the fit and the finish? It's been like a different experience, and from my perspective, it's all going to be about like what's the content and the user experience inside the cars, what's going to drive vehicle sales in the future. Do you agree or
Agreed.
disagree?
And so, yeah, agreed. And so here's the thing, right? Yeah, and you've seen some car companies make announcements to the effect. So part of it is your customer base, your drivers that want your car, say, man, my phone's with. I don't think they're thinking about it this deliberately, but I think it's what's subconsciously driving it. They're like, well, my phone is with me 100% of the time, and I'm in my car exactly 4% of the time, or 4% device. So I'm not going to have 100% platform drive my decisions in the 4% platform. So please give me CarPlay or Android Auto. So all of my things that I've already curated on my phone show up in my vehicle, and I don't have to maintain two platform environments. I mean, look, I mean, it's legit. What some car companies are saying is, yeah, I know where I'm going there. Electric drive, by the way, dirty little secret of the electric drive, and I said this while I was CEO of ChargePoint, I used to say it, is it's driven the differentiation of away from drivetrain. Anyone can make a brick go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds with an electric motor and a battery. So no more is this, oh my God, look at this acceleration. Yeah, I do a little bit of handling and driving dynamics, sure, but I mean, that's new science too. And using active suspensions and electric motors, you can actually do a lot of really cool things in software. No cost structure to that software. So you're going to have a roller skate that's going to commoditize, right? The base platform of the vehicle. Then you've got a chassis, which is only with the ergonomics of the human. You're going back to coach builders and the horse. All right, the horse is the roller skate, and the coach builder is the thing you sit in that has the accoutrements that you like. You're going back to that. So you don't need as many car companies as you have on the planet right now in the future. That's just going to go whoosh. It's got to get smaller. That universe has got to get smaller, and then the coach component of that has to differentiate in that in-cabin experience. And if that in-cabin experience is seated intentionally, because that's the 100% use case I have my phone with me 100% of the time. If that force is so strong that you can't overcome it, the auto industry commoditizes over 20 years. It commoditizes, and it has a fraction of the players, and some of them may not be American anymore, right? Because you got the Chinese that you now have to contend with that you never had to contend with. So unless we continue to erect artificial barriers, you're going to have to contend with the manufacturing machine that is China, pumping out some very cost-effective stuff. It's pretty nice.
It
So
seems
now you got to get the in-cabin right.
it seems like China's ahead of the game right now. I've seen a lot of the vehicles that they're making at lower price points that look great, and my immediate reaction is, why aren't they entering the American market? But before you answer that question, because I know you're going to get to it in a second, anyways, related to you're talking about consolidation in the automotive industry. So the NACS connector, obviously, the announcement happened in April. Ford made the announcement. General Motors followed. Everybody else is following after this. From my perspective, it's been to me, it feels like something bigger is going on, because I'm thinking, all right, why would Tesla give up their biggest competitive advantage in selling cars in their fast charging network, and why would all the car companies be willing to give up their data? And the only thing I can think of is consolidation in some way.
Well, they're not giving up the data. What data are they giving up?
My assumption was that they would be getting data tied to when someone's like plugging into the Tesla network.
Yeah,
They
they're
can.
data.
They're getting they're getting data tied to the batteries that they're using, and I'm guessing making them all. No.
No, there's no battery information that comes over that connector that the auto OEM doesn't want to send.
Got it. Okay, so that's not a factor, you're saying?
It's not a factor because the battery management system on the vehicle tells the charger what to do, not the reverse.
Okay.
And
So
the way it tells you that is using a standard protocol. So it doesn't say, here's all the characteristics of my battery. It's what the car says is, hold my beer, Mr. Charger. Here's what I want you to do. Bring go to this pack voltage. Okay, now you're at that voltage. Okay, let's connect. Boom. Okay, this is the amperage I want. And then it ramps the amperage up. Stop. I don't want any more amps than that, please.
so why did Tesla make that decision? Why did the auto manufacturers? Was it just about the experience of the driver?
I have my theories, and I think they're based in a pretty logical decomposition. But I'll start with some humor, as you know, Chris. I love to start with humor because in all jest there is some truth, right? So what I've told people, I just so like I just you read articles and stuff, and it's like, oh, ChargePoint succumbed, and like, it's like what? We put whatever connector on our charger that are on the goddamn cars. It's the tail wagging the dog, and we're tail in that one context. We're not dog. We can't drive the auto industry to a connector type. So first of all, I'm like, okay, really, guys? That's a reporter that's got, I don't know, no research or no real understanding of charging. I can say that now that I work for ChargePoint. I couldn't say that to the reporters back then, but that's what I think.
Good timing for the
really
podcast.
Reported. And so what I wanted to do, what I have said to people when I used to work for ChargePoint, is I've said, this is a travesty. In Europe, I'm a big fan of a lot of regulation, but we said regulation for the good of mankind is kind of necessary. And in Europe, they said, sorry, car companies, you're all going to decide on one thing. And we should have done that a long time ago. So now we've allowed a divergence. There's really only, everyone says, oh, there's so many connectors and so many standards. That's another thing. I'm like, please stop asking me that question before. There really isn't. In Europe, you got the AC connector, the Type 2 connector, and then you have CCS2, which includes, as a subset, that AC connector, because that's, where the big communication happens. You got two big DC pins. The funny thing about the whole NACS thing, we should have reconciled this a long time ago. I really don't care what the connector is, and it's only smaller because it multiplexes AC and DC over the same pins. That's probably the right thing to do for connector size, okay? For long-term benefit of not being as unwieldy, but the bottom line is you couldn't do that and get safety certification in the early days of the industry. It wasn't something that was fully enabled. Now it is, okay, largely because of the existence of that connector type, and people get comfortable with software being a safety mechanism. So a long time ago, we should have made the decision as an industry, but we didn't. So the humor is what I always tell reporters, because I can't be this punchy. when I'm dealing with a reporter is I wanted to make a goddamn T-shirt when the NIAC announcement came out that had a picture of a NIAC connector and a picture of a CCS1 connector, saying no one really cares. Just pick one because it's too big a pain in the ass to have two. Okay, please just pick one. So we did. We picked one. Now the problem is we got all the other stuff out there where we have to have a million different kinds of solutions. So you don't have to put a hydra's worth of cables on a charger. So now you have to deal with creative things on adapters and stuff like that to be able to make it all work in the transition period until we settle on next. Now, reasons for it. Funding. You can't get NEVI funding unless you can charge every car, and there are also a lot of other grant programs. So you can't get the funding to subsidize the expansion of charging without having the ability to charge every car. So that's driving number one. That's driving. Okay.
You think it's
Number two, and this is a theory of mine, and I'm theorizing now, is number two is if your long-term goal is that your cars will drive reliably, autonomously in a short period of time, and a robotaxi business is what you transform your company into, or a big piece of it. And maybe in the interim stages, it's a way to effectively let your car gig when you're not using it. So you own the vehicle and you can sign it to a robotaxi platform when you're not using it, and then it's your car, you drive yourself, you drive yourself autonomously, whatever, when you're not using it. So now you're funding the CapEx for the startup of a global autonomous network. Well, it's really important to basically have control of the charging network because now they're autonomous, right? And now they're being used a lot. You don't have to use a fast charger much if you're a consumer because you don't go outside your battery range that often, and you're topping up around kind of 300 miles range is fine for 300 real miles range. Not all of it is fine for a vehicle forever because you put the battery in you put the money in the nicer seats are a lower price, going at 5-6 on a battery. That's just crazy town unless you want to reserve some for towing capacity or something like that. So when we get to about 300 real miles and we're only owning the car and using it 4% of the time and going to Lake Tahoe or wherever you'd like to go ski or go to the beach or see your grandma or whatever 5-6 times a year, well, suddenly you don't access that fast charge network that often. You're accessing your fuel where you sleep and where you work and maybe a little bit around town. Incidentally, by the way, it's not all money in that. The total fuel that's going into your vehicle, you burn about 4,500 kilowatt hours a year at 3 miles per kilowatt hour. And so the total cost is 12 cents a kilowatt hour, which is the national average. It's cheaper overnight in a lot of places in the United States, not all, is a little over $500. So the entire fuel load for your vehicle is not a lot. Okay, so now the fraction that you're going to get for long haul fuel ain't a big fraction. Unless it's a robotaxi fleet. And then it's using it all the time. So if you think your cars are going to become a robotaxi fleet, then you best have a leg in the charging network and the greater charging experience. Also, if you make energy and are hoping that regulatory wise, you're going to have VPPs out there that ultimately can be broadly deployed in the US. Right now, regulatory pockets, you can't, it's not pervasive in the United States where you can have your house be part of a virtual power plant. But let's say eventually you can. But it's nice to have a ready-made album. And now you got ready-made offtake for the energy, right? You can match supply and demand. You can do a whole lot of things. So that's why I think subsidize. That's why I think it's good for everybody, right? To basically be on one connector because it enables the expansion of charging, which I think happens to be aligned with the question you started with Tesla specifically, with Tesla's long-term goal of basically having a robo-taxi fleet and a play in energy that is very much oriented. They have grid scale stuff, but very much oriented around home storage and solar. And so now if you're organizing VPPs and you have ready-made offtake, you get a lot of economic irons in the fire so you can kind of figure it all out. But for someone to actually make money purely on retailing energy at fast chargers for the general passenger car market, you're starting with 10 to 15% of the fuel. So 10 to 15% of 4,500 kilowatt hours is all you're going to dispense in that scenario. And so there, where you probably know what questions anyone might as well is why would anyone put one in? And why? No one makes money on retailing gas. They don't make it. It's like a grocery store. It's worse actually. Well, what they do is they make money on everything else, and the cross subsidies matter. Well, it turns out that it takes a little bit longer to charge your vehicle, and even if the battery could take it, the infrastructure, utility grid scale infrastructure necessary is probably overwhelming for a very, very long time at any volume of sites. So you're gonna, and you don't use it that often. So, and you're gonna want to stretch your legs and do something. So once it takes more than 5 minutes, let it take 20, it doesn't really matter, and then go buy something. So a lot of the 20 to 30-minute retail economy components that are at businesses that are out there that can sell you stuff when you stop, it's largely food services, but you can think of anything that takes 20 to 30 minutes. The assumption, the mind-jarring examples that I use, I don't know if these are viable, but you can easily play golf, but you could hit a bucket of golf balls pretty easily in 20 to 30 minutes. So, you can imagine, a driving range having EV charging, I don't know how viable that'll be, but you can imagine that. You can imagine general quick spot services available, grocery stores that are on routes to where people are driving to camp, ski, rental, shop for the groceries for the week in 20 to 30 minutes while you're loading up the battery to give you enough mileage to get to your destination. These are all applications that people think that it's going to be a convenience store selling you bottled water and Slim Jims. It's not. It's way beyond that because you're there longer. And now I actually think there's this weird flip. People are like trying to charge you overstay penalties at your fast charger, like the second your fast charger session ends, which is encouraging you to stay in the car. That's nuts. I shouldn't encourage you to stay in the car at all. I should encourage you to get out of the car. And if you want to spend 40 minutes in the little mini mart or the mini mall, right? Spending money, awesome. Because the amount of money I'm going to make on you on the extra 20 minutes is going to be a hell of a lot more than if you spent an extra 20 minutes sucking power out of the charger at effectively zero gross margin. So this all settles in two places. It settles potentially in businesses that have other reasons to put, we're only looking at the fast charger segment now, which we got onto because of the next thing, only looking at putting fast chargers in because they want to sell you power, but they have other things they can connect it to, robotaxi fleets, VPPs, what have you. So there's that genre. And then there's the genre of, I got something to sell you and you're going to be here 20 to 30 minutes. Man, you're the customer I want. And so I don't really care about, the profit off the power. It's nice. You can't lose money, but if it doesn't make you money, it doesn't matter because I'm going to fleece you for very high gross margin coffee, food, retail items, whatever, in the store attached because you're captive for 20 minutes and that's all I need. And that's where I think it lands on the fast charge side, but most of the fuel for you and I, when it's not autonomous, which is going to take a little, when it's not autonomous, it's not going to come in there.
So I wanna go back to where you're talking about VPPs, and for most people that are listening and don't know what that means, virtual power plants, and I want to take it back to charging a little bit. So V2G, it has felt like an overhyped component of the industry for several years now, and it doesn't feel like it's happening anytime soon. Like, what's the trajectory there?
So, yeah, I just say what I think, and what I think is typically the result of me not being glib. I usually look at the math behind stuff. So here's the math on B2G it's kind of a hybrid of a qualitative and a quantitative analysis. So for most charging, your car is dormant 96% of the time. So whether it's plugged in while you're sleeping or you plug it in at work occasionally, or you plug it in when you're, at the shopping mall or grocery store. um, slowing down or speeding up the rate of charging without sucking energy out of the battery. So if I slow down the rate of charging, it looks like I'm feeding it something. Okay, so if I have a charging session that's not started at peak rate, but that's started at, say, somewhere between 60 and 80% of peak rate. Because remember, I have plenty of time overnight. I usually don't have an empty battery when I show up at the shopping mall. I'm not expecting it to be full because it's not a fill model anymore. No one does. People lose that connectivity. It's just like your phone, right? You plug it in when you can. You're in an Uber. You ask the guy to borrow the little cable. You plug your phone in. Maybe you had 10% battery. You get out of the Uber. You got 30% battery. Did you care? Did you say drive around the block a little bit more so I can get another 15%? You didn't. You unplug the cable and then you go. And then when you get in the Uber to come home, you plug it in a little bit more. That's what happens with an electric vehicle. It's all our behaviors. So V2G is best solved. The benefits, the proposed benefits of V2G are on max easily achieved by just varying the charge rate for long duration parking. For long duration parking, not for the fast charge when you're going to the beach. Don't. And by the way, everyone says, no, we need to throttle that to the grid. No, don't throttle that. You can put a bolt of lightning in the car, put a bolt of lightning in the car, right? Do not try to throttle that. That is misguided. Misguided. People don't want to wait. You want to throw cold water on the EV growth curve, have it be unreliable when they're driving down their battery range. That's a nightmare. So anything that looks like fast charge for long haul driving on long haul corridors, no energy management, it's boom, as much energy as your car will take, or if I have limitations on the site, as much the fraction of energy, the peak fraction of energy I can give you out of this site. That's what it needs to be, as fast as it can go practically. Okay. Now, when you're in long duration settings, I can just speed up and slow down the charging session and have 90% of the grid benefit without having the complexity of grid type disconnects and things like that for the charging infrastructure, because I can't kill a repair tech. So when I feed in from my solar array on my roof, when I feed in, right? And by the way, that's why I'm losing power as I'm going through my final inspection, my solar and battery on my roof. So I'm losing power in 1.5 now. I have a gateway that was put in on the side of my house that basically disconnects me from the grid when the grid goes down. So my solar and battery isn't feeding into the grid when the repair guy is out there on a pole trying to fix something. Don't put on all that complexity for charging. It's for charging. So just use charge session management and don't turn it off. Up 20%. That's it. Start at 80%, go up to 100, down to 60. Then up. You'll get tons of grid benefit from that. So now, where does V2G really work? Vita Home. And by the way, Vita Home, oh, my car is going to be my backup for my house. Okay, let's take all our personal situations. Unless we have a fleet of vehicles. I don't have a fleet of vehicles. I don't want more cars than I need. I got 2 cars. One for me, one for my wife. My parents borrow it because they stay here a lot. All that sort of shit. But I don't have a car that's guaranteed to be here. So it can't be my sole backup. Now it can augment it. It can augment. But let's say everyone's the 2 cars are out and there's someone home and the power goes out.
Let me change the application on you. Instead of speaking of it residentially, how about commercially? Where 5 years from now, 40, across the United States, I know it already exists in California to some extent. 40% of I'm going to give you a specific example. 40% of cars at a high school are electric, and and employees of the school have an opportunity to, if the technology exists, plug into the school. What does that look like?
You're looking at rarefied circumstances where I have to put in a lot of infrastructure to get benefit, and if I sped up or slowed down the charging, here's a different way to construct it that's much simpler. If you're load control integrated with a utility or a grid operator, from a software perspective, which ChargePoint is in cases where that's being played with by utilities. There's no mass scale deployment of this anywhere there should be. Let's say a load control integrated. And what's offered to the school is I'm going to reduce the cost of energy going to your vehicles. We're going to have a separately metered service. So we're going to put all of your EV chargers on a separate meter. You're going to get a separate bill for it. That's going to be a separate rate structure. And if you let us manage it, that rate structure is going to be ridiculously cheap to the point where you can give the power to teachers. So instead of the teachers that are parked there, the staff, getting a dynamic check where they don't know they're going to get a check, right? What the school system says is for all the teachers that have electric vehicles, your fuel's free, or your fuel's 3 cents a kilowatt hour. Way cheaper than you can get at home, right? They can even charge for it, right? And so now what happens is it's guaranteed, and it matches the rate structure that I get from the utility. There's no complexity there. It's far less complex. You don't really need I want to feed power in. Here's what you need to be able to use cars as a grid resource. There's examples of where you can have time aligned, where vehicles are time aligned to where there's a need for energy. And that peak is moved to later in the day in most places. So here's another thing for teachers in California, when you're using your example. The grid doesn't need their power during the day.
Yeah. That's unique to California though, right?
That's yeah. So
yeah.
Here's what could happen. Imagine if I had enough battery, not as much as in my car, enough battery so like if I weren't home and the power went out, like, the stationary battery could deal with basics in the house. Imagine if your car was like a little electron tanker. Now this is going to take a lot of thinking, and you may never get there due to regulatory complexity, but now imagine that all day long at school, I'm filling up at 3 cents a kilowatt hour because I'm incented, because there's a rate structure. I'm making the rate up, by the way. There's a rate structure that says if I can dynamically adjust the charge rate, and sometimes I'm going to want you to take it faster because I got an oversupply of wind and solar, right? In exchange for that ability for the utility to have that 20% up and down control, or whatever percentage they want to put in the rate structure, you get flat rate cheap only for your EVs, separately metered. You get a really
and you bring that to your house.
I'll bring it home. And how does that help? They don't have base load at night. So now what you've done is you can anchor energy back to your house. And so it's kind of like what unnamed companies in Silicon Valley and their employees do when the food is free, is they take home a lot of quote unquote leftovers that aren't really leftovers, like they stock their fridge at home. It's the same thing applied to energy. It's, wait a minute, I can charge at work for way cheaper than I can run my lights at home. Oh, so they load up every day and they come home. It's like, most cars now 70 kilowatt hour battery packs. You're not going to burn through that at night.
I think that story, when you're talking about, like, in many cases, EV feels unrelatable to the general public in many cases because they haven't experienced the lifestyle. I think that very basic story is the most relatable future application that will get people to want to buy an EV.
Yeah, it's a good one. And what's interesting is if I have solar and battery at home, the installation of that included the necessary infrastructure to disconnect it from the grid when the grid's down. So all the safety stuff is there, so it doesn't have that battery. So the en-masse parking lot at a school, it's harder than you think to be able to separate it from the grid and still have it feed in and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I'm not going to get into technical details, but you have to put in extra stuff that's not really giving you any benefit at home. You need all that stuff anyway when you got your solar and battery running, right? And so now, when your car comes home, having your charger be part of that home charging ecosystem where you can use it as overnight power augmentation. You still need, again, I still think you need some stationary battery if you want a truly robust situation at home. That's viable. You can tanker energy you can time shift energy from day to night. And I think time shifting energy from day to night is incredibly important because aside, wind is a little not, it's not correlated with the sun, but the solar component, which is the fastest growing component of most generation is being added, and all the net new generation. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was my power going out. So that yeah,
It is all good. So here are my two final questions for you.
sure.
Um, Number one, what happens to the consolidation of the automotive industry? Number two, what happens to the consolidation of the EV charging industry?
Yeah, so I'll take the first one's easy because we already talked about it a little bit. The consolidation of the auto industry has to happen because the differentiating on powertrain performance, even though no one really needed it, but it was the emotional buying decision. That's just not there anymore. And I think what you're seeing now is not only that, but it's the cars used to be much more of a fashion item like sweaters, where one style didn't fit all. That's really consolidating. So you just don't need that many players when you make so much of it software differentiation wise and so little of it platform over time. It's just got to shrink. And then you bring in the Chinese component, which they never had a hand in the auto industry globally until recently. So that's just naturally going to over time shrink, and you'll probably see it. Big car companies that have a lot of brands consolidate brands first because I don't understand why they maintain so many different sub brands that overlap, having the same car with different badging. I can see if there was a legacy attachment in a region to a particular brand and you bought that company and you wanted to keep it as transitional, great, but transition it because it's too big a pain in the butt to manage. So big car companies with a lot of brands shrink to a core set of brands, and then car companies merge because they can leverage their investments. Another way it could go is it could separate, and both of these things could happen to some degree, where car companies get formed to basically be coach builders for roller skates that they buy through supply chain, where they focus on the novel vertical application of a vehicle. So a vehicle really geared for someone that camps, or a vehicle really, really geared for someone that um, windsurfs or does a lot of water sports or whatever. I'm making these things up just to be evocative, but you get what I'm saying. It could go in that direction too, and it likely will be a combination, right? It likely will be a combination. The charging industry kind of really is most people I don't think about it in buckets. They lump us all together, but really very different. You have tech vendors, and the tech vendors split into two kinds, actually three kinds. Hardware, pure play hardware, that'll commoditize because they don't have enough control of their destiny. Pure play software, lots of value in the software, right? But lack of ability to basically move the feature set where for the subset of features that basically need a hardware component. And then lastly, you have the ones that are full stack integrated that also have the ability to have third party hardware, kind of like the ChargePoints of the world, right? I think the commoditized hardware vendors, who knows what happens there, but that always consolidates. That's going to come down to a few players, and it'll continue to exist because the pure play software players will consolidate because it's a lot of scale to support that stuff and to keep doing all the infosec and all the regulatory stuff that you're going to have to do on the software side because your critical infrastructure. And there'll be partnerships between those companies and the general purpose hardware, the commodity hardware players. And then you'll have the full stack integrated players that'll like ChargePoint that that'll service customers, I think, better. But I think another component that'll pop up are integrators that take the component companies and front end them. So they create a virtual charge point where they create from a pure play software vendor and a pure play set of hardware vendors, um, something that they can present to the market as one interface to a whole bunch of independent technologies. It's very messy, but it's possible that it goes in that direction. What I can tell you is that there is no market out there that I've ever seen that doesn't consolidate at scale, and the scale of this market is breathtaking. I'll leave you with this: 280 million cars just on U.S. roads, cars and light duty trucks. We are about 1% penetrated. Look how big in revenue the companies are that are in the space with a 1% penetration of EVs. That's the TAM right now, 1% of the 280 million cars. Holy bejesus, when this thing gets to 10%, 20%, and it consolidates a little bit, because it's gotta, as it consolidates, oh my God. So this is what I think most investors are missing. This is like the front end of a growth curve for this transformation that's just massive, and then add other regions, add other verticals like fleet, all that sort of stuff. It's going to head in a direction that's really pretty magical, I think. And guys like you that are intrepid enough to try to build a business to really help customers who frankly are uneducated in this take advantage of this, hats off to you. It's a really necessary thing, and I'm glad a very competent and also very nice person like you is doing that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words, and thank you for spending so much time talking about all this. This was awesome.
Anytime. The problem with me is if you want me to talk about something, just ask, because you had me at hello. And
I know you're always good for that.
Right.
Well, thanks again for the time, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care. Bye.